Hello and welcome back to Navigating NIL, powered by Eccker Sports, the leading NIL education company. I'm joined once again by Randy Eccker. Randy, thanks for hopping back on with us.
Thanks, Tyler.
Absolutely. So, the last time we were talking, we were starting to get into, more your professional career, right? From the business side of things. And we were talking about how your connection with Coach Tom Osborne, who is a legend, obviously, for those of us who are around Nebraskans. He's a living legend out there and he's beloved. And so, we chatted briefly about how your experience working with him on turning film into video and being able to duplicate and cut film and really use it for spring football is what he wanted to use it, how that launched into a whole industry that has become Huddle and Exos and a whole lot of other things. So I'd love it if you could just talk a little bit about, your journey from broadcaster who was helping out a friend to really a pioneer within the streaming industry.
Yeah, it's it's quite a ride. I'm glad we have an entire session to talk about this because there's a lot of stuff here to unpack. After I left sports video and went to work, that company, we went public and it became called Sports Tech. And once we had saturated the market and we had 90+% market share of the NFL, the NBA, the tier one football and tier one basketball programs that were interested in those types of things, they started a recruiting service with the public money and the plan. And I just didn't believe in their mission. And so I came back and I ran the Omaha Racers for a year. I worked with Steve Eidelman and Mike Tebow, and that was a great experience. I learned a lot about what I wanted to do and how I wanted to be, and I learned a lot about myself on who I didn't want to be and where I wanted to make sure I focused my career and my opportunities on. And after about 18 months there, I just hung out a shingle and started consulting, and I did some regulatory research, introductions, and things like that. And I got aligned with my business partner of that era then, John Bunce, and who many people will know in Omaha. He's just a wonderful guy and was super successful as a businessman. Was a senior executive at W.R. Grace, which was a Fortune 15 company at the time, and just a great guy. And he taught me a lot about business, and he taught me a lot about capital and capital raising and fundraising and strategy and things like that. And so we partnered together. And I also got back into the broadcasting industry. So as one of my friends during that time frame said, Randy, I know what you are. You're the master of the part-time job. Because I had a bunch of things that we were doing. And one of the things that we did some investment banking, and I ultimately lined up the initial investment into a company called the National Information Consortium, which we lined up the first investment. And then after the first investment, within a year, we took it public. And then after that, it grew to about a $3 billion company. And then a couple of years after that, it went from $3 billion when the technology bubble burst in 2000. It went from $3 billion down to about $100 million. And so, as my partner's wife said, John, we're not rich anymore, are we? Right. So that was an interesting ride. But in the meantime, I was able to get alignment and start to work with a group at Avid Technology. And they had started a very small division at Avid to take the Avid Technology digital media engine and port it over to sports. And so they asked me to come in and help them. And so we, in essence, founded, there's about 12 of us, 3, kind of key guys who came from Avid. And I was an advisor to that senior group. And we did a really nice job then of converting the industry from what we had done in the 80s from film to video. In the 90s, we took it from video to digital video and all of the benefits that provided. And that was a company called Eccker Sports. And we then were able to develop 90+% market share for the NFL and college basketball and the NHL, the NBA, the NHL, and then all of the tier one schools and athletic departments that were participating in those sports as well. And so we developed a lot of experience and continued to further our reputation and our relationships. And And it was just a great ride. And I had the ability to do all these things, including a nightly sports talk radio show with Gary Java from 91 to 2000 at what eventually became the ESPN station in Omaha. And then I was able to parlay that and do a lot of the color commentary for the Nebraska games and Creighton games, basketball primarily, some high school football and basketball in the area as well. So, it was a great time in my life. I was able to be very successful financially and professionally and develop a lot of experiences and things like that. And then in 2000, we sold Avid Sports to a company called Pinnacle, which was another large publicly traded company. And because of the unique nature of my relationship with Avid Sports, I did not have a non-compete. And so a guy who I had started to work with had a company called XOS, and we had done an alignment and kind of a joint venture between Exos and Avid Sports. And when Avid Sports sold to Pinnacle, Dan Ayton, who was the original founder of Exos, said, Randy, I don't really want to work with the guys from Pinnacle, but I kind of like working with you. Do you want to buy in and become co-owner of the company with me? So we had 3 employees and 3 clients at the time, and we built that to the largest sports technology and digital media company in the country over the next 11 years. And we had the coaching analytics, and we really transitioned the industry then from digital video to multimedia. And even today, Exos has 90+% market share in the NFL. 64 of the 65 schools in the Power 5 conferences use it for football. Virtually every NHL and college hockey team use it. Basketball's moved on. They actually work with Huddle, which is a local Omaha and Lincoln-based company who have done a wonderful job with the things that they do. But Exos was a great ride, and it's really where I took all those experiences from playing and coaching and consulting and advising and selling and all those things and put them into management. And so as the co-founder and then later CEO and chairman of Exos, we were able to really build a very strong national company, international if you want to include Canada, that really spanned the entire market. And we built up and eventually bought back what we had sold to Pinnacle from Avid Sports. We bought that back, taught me about how to go raise money. When I was there, we raised probably $70 to $80 million in venture capital. We sold part of the company for $60 million at one point. We were raising money at another point at over $100 million valuation. So it was such a great experience and a great learning experience for me. And then operationally, we had the core business, which had been the facility design and integration, where we'd go into all the new facilities that were being built, and we would provide the technology. So that was very much a needed part of the overall industry at the time. And then on the coaching analytics side, we were able to transition the entire industry from digital video to multimedia. And then we earned our way back up to that 90+% market share in all the sports that we talked about before, football, basketball, and hockey. But because I had lined up that original investment in the internet company, I talked to Dan Ayton when I came in. I said, first of all, we need to do football well, because 80+% of all capital that's spent in this market is by football teams and organizations. And we've got to figure out a way to leverage those relationships we've developed to take advantage of the internet and to be able to communicate effectively with with the fans. And we built that side of the company to over 180 different collegiate properties, but we were able to build that up, and we were not only providing the websites, but the CMS behind that. And we also were streaming more video, more sports and event videos than anybody in the country, including ESPN or CBS or Fox or anybody in those days. At a place like Nebraska and Oklahoma, Florida, USC, places like that, we were streaming over 300 live events per year.
Wow.
And again, that's before ESPN was out gobbling up all those rights, or Fox or people like that. And what they did pay for in those days was the linear rights to live. And then we would have access to all of the highlight packages. And of course, any games that weren't streamed live over one of the networks, we could stream those live to all their fans who wanted to have access to them through the internet.
That's really revolutionary. So
Yeah.
this was an industry that you were really at the forefront of, and looking back now, obviously it makes sense that it would be such a big success. I mean that was a necessary transition into the streaming industry and whatnot. And something that's very similar in terms of the potential is NIL. And I know when you were playing, I'm sure NIL is something that wasn't even in your guys' minds. So what about NIL and what about the NIL industry did you identify with that whether it reminded you of the film industry that you ended up pioneering the whole streaming? What about the NIL industry made you say, this is what I want to be involved in, this is what my next venture will be?
In 2011, again, I just hung out a shingle and I started consulting back into the sports technology and digital media industry. I helped a number of the conferences um, to develop their own digital networks and things like that. But then about 5 or 6 years ago, through a friendship really I'd had for a number of years with Outfront Media Sports, which was more recently acquired by Playfly, I started helping them with their high school strategy. And I really had a strong interest in the high school market, Tyler, because it has needs like for, kids want to be competitive, coaches want to be competitive, they want the tools and all those things. And because it's so fragmented and disparate as a market, it was hard to figure out a way to really provide value at, for the various stakeholders on a national scale, because it cost more money than you could make coming back out of it.
Right.
So 5 or 6 years ago, I started partnering with the Outfront guys and really learning the market and getting involved with some of the people, learning the relationships. How does it work? And I became very impressed with the level of people in leadership positions on a state by state basis. Right? These are great people. They're caring people. They're from the industry. They want to be successful. They want to serve the needs of their constituents, which are the coaches, the athletic directors, the superintendents and principals, of course, but then the kids, right, and their families, right? They want to serve those needs. And so they've evolved quite a bit from a leadership perspective and from an understanding of what the kids and the families and the other stakeholders need. And so we were involved in digital media. We were involved in data analytics, mobile, esports, all of those things. And then about 3 years ago, I was introduced to Blake Lawrence, who was the CEO of Open Doors. And I just have such a great affinity for Blake and who he is and where he comes from and how much he cares and a desire to do things the right way and all of those things. And so I was able to get alignment with him and help him in a number of different ways. And I've certainly learned a lot from him and from the Open Doors folks. But one day we were talking about their priorities, this a couple of years ago, their priorities for the company. And I said, you're missing out on, in my mind, the thing that's the most important part of the company and the opportunity. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, well, it's the high school market. He goes, boy, we just don't have the wherewithal, the resources or the time to really do that. So I asked him if he would be okay if I did it. And he said, sure. And so really, that was the genesis of it, because I know in one of the questions you had sent prior, kind of what prompted that and why. And when I was coaching, the NCAA came out with a mandate. It was called Prop 48 at the time. And that was the formula that by which a student athlete could qualify either for eligibility at the NCAA level or a scholarship at the NCAA level. And it was a very, very cumbersome formula that included an SAT score or an SAT score, core course requirements, um, GPAs for core courses, things that were brand new to the entire industry. And it was hard for us as coaches and administrators to understand it, let alone kids, families, counselors, coaches, high school coaches. And that's what NIL reminded me of, because it was being thrust into the collegiate space. And all of these kids in high school were aspiring to to matriculate to college, right? They were aspiring to be recruited. They were aspiring to be successful, yet nobody was taking the time to really educate them on what was going on. Whether you're an administrator in high school, you're a coach, you're a student athlete, or you're a family member or a parent. Nobody was taking the time to do that. And so we took that upon ourselves at Eccker Sports to become that entity that was helping people to understand, to provide some guidance and ultimately some support on them for them on their NIL journey.
Yeah, definitely. And NIL is something that, is constantly developing. I remember when I got my start with Eccker Sports, my primary role was doing research, right? And reading laws and reading bylaws, and the amount of changes that have been made, between now and January of this year is incredible to me. So what are some things that have surprised you? I'm sure there are many, but what are some things that stand out to you from the last year and since NIL was passed that have kind of changed your outlook on things or changed your approach to this?
I think probably there's several, um, which typically happens in new industries, right? It certainly happens for young sports or young entrepreneurial companies, high growth companies, and things like that. When 2 years ago, I believe California was the only state that had approved NIL at that time.
Yeah,
And they had always approved it because of, many students had SAG cards, Screen Actors Guild cards. So it was hard to say you can't act, but not play sports, right? So they had always kind of approved it. So I thought by this time, so 2 years later, I would have thought 3 to 5 states would have approved NIL for the high school market.
wow,
Realizing eventually it was gonna filter down, but I just didn't think, given the tenor of what NIL is, sports people, if they have their druthers, right, they would rather keep it as the status quo, right?
totally.
Coaches and principals and ADs, and you've experienced that in the last year that you've been.
Yeah,
There's a lot of naysayers out there um, around NIL and what it's going to do to the sports market and what it's going to mean to the kids and to me as a coach or an athletic administrator or whatever it is. So the biggest evolution has been the fact that now, as of today, 23 states have approved NIL benefits for their high school student athletes. So that is a huge transformation
right.
in perspective and mentality, and certainly in activity. And I think we're very fortunate in that we've spent the last, really year and a half really trying to position ourselves as the leader in that market so that we can be helpful to the kids and to the athletic administrators and the families and the coaches and things like that.
Absolutely. So just to jump in real quick, I'm very curious. One thing that stands out to me about your career as an athlete, coach, broadcaster, businessman, whatever it may be, is your adaptability. So you've mentioned, the negative responses that, as someone who was doing a lot of sales this summer, I remember I've had plenty of conversations where it's, why is this here? And it's such a polarizing topic. But like you said, there's 23 states now that legalized it. So how have you had to adapt your strategy and, I guess, just adapt your approach to everything due to the major surprises that NIL has brought?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting thing. It's evolved so quickly. I think we are so fortunate in our company, and we talked about it this morning. We have such smart people in our company, and they're the ones on the front lines. My business partner Tim Prukop has been an amazing developer of relationships and strategy and things like that, and he's just done such a wonderful job. Then the other people who have who have joined us here over the last year and a half or so, are just really top line sports people, right? In it for the right reasons, trying to do the right things, trying to be really helpful in that regard. And so that as the industry has evolved so rapidly and so quickly, so is our strategy. And I think whereas we were leading with education historically, which we still are, we're really, I think it's really starting to separate itself out from the standpoint that we want to help the educators, meaning the coaches, the administrators at the organizational level and the association level as well, really to navigate the chaos or the challenges that come with NIL
Mm-hmm.
and the evolution of it as it's continuing to evolve. But on the player side and the family side, we still want to educate and support and guide and things like that. We also want to help them to optimize, right, their NIL value, right? How do we do that? And it's not just about how can I make more money,
Mm-hmm.
but living in a digital world like we do, it's just as important for the non-student athletes as it is the student athletes, right? We're living in a social media world, and they are all social media natives. I've picked up enough probably to be dangerous. It always scares me when my grandkids, who are, somewhere between 4 and 6 and 8, they know more about my iPhone than I do, and they navigate it more readily than I do. It's really funny.
Right.
It's really pretty funny. So they're not as interested in the rote guidance or the education. They want to learn more by experience, right? So we've had to adjust and try and get more experiential with the education and the guidance and support, but also how do we help them to optimize the value that they're creating for themselves? How do we help them develop that through their social media presence, the development of the communities that they're developing on a social media basis? Those types of things. And then as we continue to scale, how can that market then attract more sponsors and donors and contributors and things like that can really help the kids to monetize and create value from the hard work that they've put in?
Definitely. And one thing that I have a lot of respect for that you are really good at is cultivating and maintaining meaningful relationships. And for our presence in Texas, for those of you listening who don't know, we work very closely with the Texas High School Coaches Association, which is one of the, I would argue, the leading, coaches association in the country. And, we've built a fantastic relationship with them, but that's something you've been able to do throughout your career. How have you been able to do such a good job cultivating relationships that then are mutually beneficial, both personally and professionally? And also, why do you think it's so important in the business world and in the sports industry to have those types of relationships?
Again, just such a great kind of leading question, and it's so critical because the thing that most people don't realize is how fraternal the sports industry is. Right? They look at everybody and you're trying to kill each other, right? On the field, right? And that's true, right? You're super competitive on the field or on the court or the pitch or whatever it is. But off the field, people are very fraternal. There's much alignment. It's a pretty closed industry as well. It's hard to break into, and people help each other. They like to help each other. Because they know that eventually they may work together or they may rely on each other for something. And so developing relationships and the integrity of those relationships is really important in the sports market. And not because you want to get something out of it, is because that's the right way to be. And if you're from the sports market, you understand that. You know that that's inherent and that's endemic to who you are as a sports professional and a sports person. And if you come from the outside of the market, it's hard to understand. You think, well, yeah, I love sports. I can figure this out. It's just much harder than if you grow up kind of within the industry personally and professionally. And so that's always been an important aspect. Treat people, the golden rule, right? Treat people the way you'd like to be treated. Help them to be successful. And I think that's one of the things in the sports market. There's so much loyalty to people because it's so competitive. It's hard to get into, it's hard to stay in, it's hard to be successful in because it is so competitive. But if you can help somebody to be successful, if you can make yourself indispensable to that person, um, they're going to bend over backwards to help you to be successful. And that's what's always happened is we've treated everybody with respect. We've tried to treat people the way we'd like to be treated. We try to help them to be successful. And in so doing, there's a tremendous relationship that gets cultivated, and therefore a strong friendship where we want to help each other to be successful. And relative to Texas, I think you'd really have to go to Tim Prukop, our partner, who has just done a wonderful job. And he
Totally.
lives in Texas. He's been a high school coach in Texas, so he knows how people think. He's got relationships there. He can empathize, and he's sensitive to, and he can get alignment with those coaches. And he's just done a wonderful job developing a relationship with and a deep relationship, not only with the Texas high school coaches administration and the guys who run it, but throughout the entire industry, a lot of the athletic directors, a lot of the coaches, and things like that. And I think he and you, Tyler, and the other folks we have working on our team really deserve all the credit for that, because we certainly wouldn't be here without Tim and without all of you guys.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I know everybody does. And Tim's someone I'm definitely very grateful for. So he'll be coming on the podcast after you, Randy. So for those listening, you can expect to hear an episode with our other co-founder, Tim Prukop, in January. But yeah, Tim was a fantastic mentor to me this summer. He's very intelligent, really good at what he does, but he's about the right things. And he's someone I definitely have a lot of admiration for. And you mentioned it. It's not about, recording, or I'm sorry, it's not about cultivating a relationship to cultivate a relationship and get something out of it, right? People aren't means to an end. So the respect with which you guys treat our partners and people that we're working with is something that's really impressive. And I think it's why we're in a position to succeed. And one thing that really stood out to me was this summer, I was lucky enough to be down in Texas with all you guys working at the coaching convention in San Antonio. And Erin Hardigan is someone that I know you have a good relationship with, family, friends. And I was blown away because the first time I met her, she took me around and introduced me to probably 10 to 20 of the top coaches in the state of Texas, guys who I'd been calling all summer and couldn't get a hold of. And, one introduction from Erin who knows you and kind of knows me just because of that. And I met, all these guys, facilitated some great connections. I met some people I really admire. Mike Roach is one who works in Texas for 24/7 Sports. And yeah, connections really make the world go round. So that's something that, I think a lot of people admire about you and something you've done really well throughout your career. So you definitely deserve your flowers for that. But I also have a few questions more specifically about NIL. I mean, you were a pioneer in the video streaming industry and doing Exos and all of that. And, NIL is so new. It's the first couple of years of this. And my feeling this summer was NIL, we're almost early, like too early to the market, in my opinion, where we were at this summer. And that made the sales process very interesting and entering the market interesting. And we were helped, by those relationships that we have. But I guess where do you see NIL going from here? Because it's very polarizing, right? So I guess my question is, why do you think NIL is such a polarizing topic? And do you see it continuing to be, or as it gets normalized, how do you see NIL developing?
Yeah, change is hard, and it's really hard for people who've done something the same way for their entire lives,
Mm-hmm.
right? And especially when that change, it's easier to take when it evolves. It's harder to take when it's mandated, and that's really what's been happening. And so you have a lot of coaches who've been, and a lot of very successful coaches and leaders, not just coaching but the administration as well, that are used to doing things a certain way, and that's not wrong, right? Matter of
Right.
fact, in a lot of ways, it's been great. It's great for kids. It's great for schools. It's great for professions and all of those things. But, the Supreme Court just thought it, deserved a decision that was going to dictate it. So now
Right.
it's going to be forced down on the market. And so, like everything, change is imminent and change will eventually take hold. And that's why it's important, I think, for us to be leaders, particularly in the high school market. And we're bubbling up into the collegiate market as well, which is a natural thing for us to do given our backgrounds and our experience and relationships and things like that. But it's really important, I think, for us to provide leadership and also show how it can be a good, positive thing, right? And one of the things we've done, Tyler, as you know, we've started a foundation.
Yep.
And that foundation, the FAIR Foundation, is I think really a great thing. It's something I'm very passionate about, obviously, um, around NIL for the high school market in particular. And again, it'll blossom up a little bit into the collegiate market. We already have a couple of groups we're starting to work with. And that what that will do, it'll do three things that I think are all really important for the high school market, in particular, young people, and NIL in particular. Number one, it'll help subsidize 30% of the proceeds will go to subsidize NIL education for kids and their families, which is a really important part of this. It's important kids don't go in, their families and coaches don't go into this blind, right? Number two, 60% of the proceeds will go towards subsidizing NIL finance community service-based activities. So it kind of takes the sting out of NIL and kids getting the cars or the $100,000 or the $1 million commercials or whatever.
Totally.
These are things that benefit the communities that they live in. And sponsors and donors and contributors will help fund that. And that's one of the things you're starting to see in a lot of the colleges and a lot of the universities. They may have multiple collectives. And in a lot of them, one of those collectives is a not-for-profit that's really dedicated to community service-based types of activities. And so the money will go to another 501c3, and then that money will be used to help subsidize community service-based activities, whether it's speaking engagements to youth, whether it's going to referee or work camps, to post things on social media, whatever that might be, things that are benefiting the communities through the 501c3s that are also active in those communities. And, I know you know this because you and I have talked about it before, and I continually send out articles to our team around community service-based NIL-related activities. And that's really cool. And that's one of the things I think for a lot of the college kids that have started to earn NIL monies, that a lot of them are either donating that or using it for community service-based benefits and activities and things like that. And then 10% of the foundation's proceeds will go towards scholarships and grants to students who have been active in community service-based activities, and they need to defray the cost of going to college. So it's kind of a win-win-win-win for everybody, and it's something that I think can really help with the transition of NIL becoming mainstream into the high school market and even a lot of the colleges and the universities, where you really do utilize NIL subsidies and financing to do things that are going to really benefit the communities that the kids live in.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's one thing that's so appealing to me about our company is I know you're a very mission-oriented person, and that the mission of the company ultimately is a big deal for you. And you are like, an athlete dealing with NIL, and the fact that if you're going to do something with a company, if you're going to found a company, work with a company, they have to be about the right things. And I think that definitely, like you said, NIL is so polarizing because you're seeing the $1 million deals signed by kids, and it's so sensationalized. But when you break it down to what it is and what it should be, do you think NIL is intrinsically a good thing for college athletes and even high school athletes?
I do, as long as it's managed the right way.
Right.
Number one, it was really geared towards the one percenters, right? Or the 1% of the 1%.
Totally.
Right? Because those kids could be up, it's like if you're a great musician, a John Mayer, for example, or, I might be dating myself with that analogy.
Great musician.
Justin Bieber, people like that who in the music industry, even in their teenage years, were making literally millions of dollars, right? But you can have a savant in sports who couldn't make any money until he went pro, right? And that happens depending upon which sport you're in. When you're 20 or 21 in football, when you're 19 or 20 when you're in basketball. Baseball was different, right? You could come right out of high school. Hockey's a little bit different, but even so, at earlier ages you couldn't do it. And for the most popular sports in the United States, football and basketball, those kids were relegated to really living a pretty difficult life. You asked me earlier about my experiences and how that fed NIL. I was so poor as a college student athlete, and my parents were both teachers, and they sent me money, and they sent me what they could each month, but that was barely enough to get by on. And so I would work in the summers and I'd work, construction jobs or landscaping jobs or making $250 an hour just so I'd have enough money to buy some clothes to go to college and then to have a little bit of spending money to go out and eat and things like that. You had to eat in the cafeteria, right? And they closed at 6. We got out of practice at 5:45 oftentimes. So you'd miss that. You'd go to McDonald's or Burger King. So all of these things, I think, are ultimately good as long as we understand that we're trying to help the 1 or 2 percenters. They're going to get helped, and probably out of proportion to what they probably deserve from our perspective,
Right.
from the old school perspective.
Yep.
But all those people that have done a nice job of building social media presence and representing themselves the right way and doing unique things and wanting to be helpful in the community and all of those things, if we do this the right way, and that's one of the things we take very seriously, we want to provide the leadership in the market so we can do these things the right way so that the masses of the kids can also benefit from this and have something that they can live on comfortably as they matriculate through their collegiate experience and learn really valuable lessons. I think that's the other thing that gets lost on a lot of people, right? Having a job. NIL is not free money.
Right.
NIL is having a job while
Right.
you're in school, while you're playing basketball. You have commitments, you have responsibilities, all of those types of things. And that's one of the things that the way that we're trying to help set it up too is you have a responsibility, you have to honor that responsibility, you have to be accountable for that responsibility, then you get paid for it. And then there's a compliance aspect, you have to report that. And then, of course, there's a tax aspect that a lot
Right.
of people either don't understand or don't wish to address.
Right.
And those things are all really important for young kids to understand growing up, right? And it's better if we can do that in a closed environment, and we can help mentor them as they move through that environment and through that time frame in their life. So when they do graduate, they're able to succeed in life and in their whatever their career, or their profession, or whatever else that might be. Because a lot of kids are and a lot of student athletes are very ill prepared to head out into the world when it comes to things like that because they've never had to do it.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point is it's such a learning curve. You're cultivating your own brand and you're learning to represent yourself and manage your own image, especially with social media. Like you mentioned, that's such a big deal nowadays. So that's all I've got in terms of the NIL questions. But before I let you go, I've got a 5-question rapid fire gauntlet for you. So prepare yourselves, everyone. We're about to get an inside look at the mind of Randy Eccker. So the first question, Randy, what is the funniest, most embarrassing sports story involving yourself that you can think of off the top of your head?
The most embarrassing, for me personally, it's probably not humorous to anybody else. It is to me, and I get a lot of mileage out of it today. My senior year, we made it to the NCAA tournament in basketball, and we had a great experience. We lost to DePaul, by 2 with the last second shot. They were a top 5 team in the country. We should have, could have, would have won that game. So super disappointing. That was a Sunday. I got home, and a day later, I joined the baseball team, on a road trip. So I hadn't swung a bat. I hadn't fielded the ground ball. I had not done anything since the fall. And they put me in, I think we're either playing Tulsa or Oral Roberts. We were playing in Tulsa for sure. And they put me into DH. And I had taken one session of batting practice. And I got up, and the first live pitches I saw were in game time.
Oh, my God.
And I took three right down the middle and could not even get my bat off my shoulder because I was so disoriented. It was kind of boom, boom, boom. Okay, now we got that over with anyway. So that was super humiliating for a guy that
Totally.
thought he was pretty good to
Totally.
do that. So anyway.
For a coach's son, that's just a discombobulating feeling, man. That walk back to the dugout, I know it well. That's very funny. So the next question, second of the 5, what's your go-to cheat meal?
Oh boy, cheat meal? Pasta. Right.
Okay.
My wife makes this great spaghetti, and I don't know you'd call it a cheat meal, but it's my favorite, and certainly. Other than the carbs you get and the calories you get, it's probably not on anybody's health food list. But
yeah, that sounds
at least
fantastic.
not the way she makes it. It's so great.
Good. That makes it all the more better. Next one. If you had one superpower, what would your superpower be?
You know, Tyler, like most people, I would say it evolves over time, right? If you would have asked me this question in my 20s, it would have been different than my 30s, than my 40s, etc. Today, I would really say it's being a product of my experiences, right? Because I've had some super challenging experiences, both personally and professionally, that may break some people. And I've had so many rewarding experiences, both personally and professionally, that continue to give you hope and nurture your positive attitude. And I've had so many great relationships. Just being a byproduct of all of those experiences, I think gives you perspective. Maybe perspective's the right way to look at it. When I saw the question, I thought kindness, I thought empathy, but I think perspective's probably the right term in that regard.
That is a great answer. I probably would have said it'd be fun to fly. So I have a lot of respect for the perspective that's a good superpower to have. And I think that also speaks to, maybe I'm dating myself with that answer, but I love it. That's great. That's great. So then this one's a bit of a thinker.
Does that mean you can fly? Is there something I don't know about you?
I'm wishing if I could choose one superpower, it would probably be flight, which is basic, but what are you going to do?
Are you asking me what I'd like it to be, or were you asking
yes,
me what it
if
was?
you could pick one, like if you could pick a superpower.
I would say perspective.
There you go.
Would also be the right thing to say.
Money. That's great. And then this one's a thinker. So if you're going on a deserted island and you can only bring 3 things with you, what are you bringing with you?
Can family be one thing?
Yes, I'll let you do that. I know you love your grandkids.
Man, I love my family.
Yep.
That is so family would be one. Golf clubs would be the second for sure.
Yep.
I'd have to say probably a cell phone would be the third, right?
Yeah.
So you could.
Yeah.
Number one, you'd have to have something for my grandkids to play with. But more importantly, at some point, you'd want to get rescued, right?
Right. That was my thought process, too. I was talking to one of my friends last night. I was like, I'd bring a cell phone. He's like, it's a deserted island. I was like, have you heard of the internet? It's doing good things nowadays. And then
a satellite phone.
Yeah, exactly. See, I like where your head's at. Very practical. Perfect. So final question before we wrap things up. Who's the greatest athlete that you've ever played against?
Greatest athlete. The greatest. So athlete versus player. I'll give you 2, right?
Okay.
So athlete was Darrell Griffith.
Mm-hmm.
And Darrell was a freshman when I was a junior, and we played in the first session of this, in session 1 of the podcast we talked about. And Darrell, I tell you what would happen. we had this offense where the ball would swing. You'd want to swing the ball, right? And we'd screen down and swing the ball, and you'd almost do it without looking. And what Louisville, the way they pronounce it, what Louisville was doing is they were switching everything. And so probably 3 or 4 times I would get the ball, I'd swing it, and Daryl would jump out and switch, and I would throw it to him like he's leading the fast break, like an outlet pass. And what would happen is Daryl would be so excited, and the crowd was so excited that as soon as that happened, there was this huge roar. Daryl would catch my outlet pass and shuffle a little bit because he wanted to throw down so bad. So the referee that would be standing by me would blow his whistle, but I'm the only one who could hear it because the crowd was so loud and Daryl was so excited. So he'd go down and he would do these unbelievable magic dunks. And they were the Doctors of Dunk. That was their nickname at the time. So in the mid-70s. So he's the best athlete, without question. And then I got to know David Thompson fairly well. And David was the best athlete I ever watched. The best player, by far, was Larry Bird.
Yeah.
And we were so fortunate to beat them 3 times my senior year, his junior year.
Wow.
On our way to, some bragging here. On the program, not on me, but we were very fortunate that we beat them 3 times. Larry was great 2 of the 3. One that he didn't play great, he had the flu, and we held him to his career low 12 points.
Wow!
But we were the bragging part is that we were the only team in the country that year to win both the regular season championship of our conference and the postseason championship.
Oh, that's great. I love it. I'm always here for a big Blue Jay fact. Well, perfect. I appreciate you joining us, Randy. That was a wonderful interview. I'm very appreciative of you, obviously, as a great mentor. I'm coming up on a year with you guys, and it's been a wonderful year for me. So from myself and the rest of our team, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. I mean, for everyone, I hope it was entertaining. We're sitting here with one of the few men to ever lock down Larry Bird. So it's
no. Whoa.
It's a big podcast. It's a big guest.
Well, Tyler, thanks so much for hosting. You do a wonderful job. You're a great person. You're smart. You're intelligent. You communicate well. You're well on your way to your future, and we're very fortunate to have you with us.
I appreciate that a lot. So thanks again for joining us, and everybody, make sure that you leave a 5-star rating underneath this podcast and all the other ones that you listen to, and prepare yourselves because 2 weeks from now we're going to be talking to Tim Prukop, the other co-founder. So thanks again, Randy, and thanks everyone for listening.